I think it could be very different for some veteran players, especially if we get to a point where the owners impose a schedule on the players. If that happens, there'll be some veteran players not very happy, and they may just choose to opt out.
I can tell you unequivocally, we are going to play Major League Baseball this year. 100%.
So far, the two different perspectives are leaving them very far apart.
So if you were 100% last week, what percentage do we feel now?
It's something less than 100, that's for sure.
So they met in a room and they left, and now they seem to disagree on what it is they agreed upon when they were in the room.
It's just a disaster for our game. Absolutely no question about it.
It really is unfortunate that baseball doesn't find itself in this position, that baseball put itself in this position.
This much we know about the negotiations between the players and owners in Major League Baseball. It has been acrimonious, and some think that perhaps a deal is forthcoming at some point. Many believe there will be a season, but of course this pandemic could certainly get in the way. So let's address this with Shi Davidi and Joe Siddall here on Blue Jays Central at home. First to you, Shi. And I know things are ever changing, but what's the latest on negotiations between the players and the owners?
Well, Jamie, the players still have yet to formally respond to Major League Baseball's insistence on a 60-game season. They have to accept or reject that. But they're also mulling over what's been described as a bit of an olive branch from Commissioner Rob Manfred, with him saying that expanded playoffs for this season won't necessarily be guaranteed into next year as well. That's important for the players because the give of expanded playoffs is a significant concession on their front. They don't want to lose leverage if there is another potential negotiation into next year. Of course, there's a CBA at the end of 2021 that's in the backdrop of all this as well. So this is another attempt to reach a deal. The sides have had a lot of trouble. Commissioner Rob Manfred does have the power via the March 26 agreement to impose a season on the players. They don't want to go that route. Both sides, I mean, they're going to have a lot of complications just figuring out how to keep everybody as healthy as possible. They don't want to go into it with a bit of acrimony over this negotiation as well.
Joe, every time there is some form of rejection, either by the players or the owners, to the other side's latest offer, you can see the eye rolling going on across North America among baseball fans. How do you think this game will be impacted? And like the 94 strike, when I know personally, I heard people say, I'm not going back to baseball at all after that strike. Some did, some didn't. What kind of an impact do you think that the negotiations that we've witnessed so far will have on the game long term?
Well, this negotiation should have been probably settled a month ago. Remember when we were hearing spring training 2.0 starting around June 10th and the season starting July 1st or the 4th of July in the U.S.? That clearly has not happened. And what you're referring to is fan perception, and it is very important. It was important in 94. Sure, a lot of people probably came back. But I think it could be devastating this time because if they do not play baseball because of economics this season, you're talking about 18 months since the last World Series ended. And I would fear, and I'm sure the Major League Baseball teams, owners, players, everyone in the industry should fear that people can find other things to do. This would be a very bad look if they don't come to some kind of settlement. It's one thing if the coronavirus cancels baseball and prevents baseball from being played on the field. Fan perception would be okay if they had an agreement and that it was the virus that prevented baseball from happening. But the perception is not going to be good at all if it's because of economics.
That could still happen. COVID-19 could shut down the season entirely in time. We've already seen, Shi, as you know, the Blue Jays having to cease operations at their facility in Florida. And then reports come out that everybody's going to have to move their quote-unquote spring training to their host cities. That provides a bit of a challenge here in Canada. What are the ramifications there?
Jamie, they're wide-ranging, and the Blue Jays were looking at being potentially nomadic a little bit this season too, and this is yet another wrench into that. You know, at the beginning of last week, Mark Shapiro was added to the National Lobbyist Registry so he could continue his contacts with the government in the hopes of finding a way for the Blue Jays to play their home games in Toronto. And there was late part of the week, some optimism that maybe there was some momentum there, some movement on the NHL front with, creating a permission for the NHL to hold one of its hub cities in Canada. And so that would give the Blue Jays a little bit more leeway or support, for instance, saying that, hey, we can make this happen here too. But now there's an outbreak, and the government is certainly not going to look fondly on the possibility of opening up the border to a team that's had some infections and, perhaps some questions about whether they might somebody might potentially be bringing the coronavirus into the country. That's obviously going to be more difficult. And so, the Blue Jays might not be able to come here at all, even for spring training, for a regular season. And they may not want to be in Florida right now because there were potentially infections at their spring training location. So some of the possibilities that they've examined in the past, one of them is Tropicana Field. The Blue Jays weren't completely comfortable with using that as their home field. They were going to go with Dunedin, all things being equal. But now they may have to potentially find themselves at the Trop if they can't find an alternative arrangement.
My goodness. Okay, Joe. So let's say that you're still playing. You're an active player. An agreement is reached between players and owners, and it's time to get back to baseball. Give us a sense on what the average player might be thinking right now about the risk they may be asked to take in going back to work during a pandemic. What do you think the average player is concerned about?
If I'm a younger player, if I'm 24, 25 years old, I'm in my first or second year in the big leagues, I think I trust in Major League Baseball and the Players Association coming to the agreement with all of the health and safety protocols that have been put in place. So you trust that, you want to play, you want to make some of that salary that you agreed to, and you want to continue to try to accumulate a little bit of service time. Those are all important things. The young players, of course, want to play. I think it could be very different for some veteran players, especially if we get to a point where the owners impose a schedule on the players. If that happens, there'll be some veteran players not very happy, and they may just choose to opt out because they don't necessarily need that fraction of their salary this year. They don't necessarily need the service time, especially if they're already around that 10-year mark that maximizes the pension. So it depends on the player. I know as a young player, I would trust in the process and what's going on, that they are providing a safe environment. But if I'm a veteran type player, and I'm sure there are several of them out there, there'll be some question marks.
It is shaping up to be the wildest, craziest, most abnormal season that we have ever witnessed, and maybe we'll see it at some point in the near future. Our thanks to Shi Davidi and Joe Siddall, and to you for watching this edition of Blue Jays Central at Home.